everyone, welcome. You're watching Dream Big. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we are speaking to Alan Knott-Craig III. Most people know him as Alan Knott-Craig Jr. though, and he's now the CEO of Project Isizwe. He's going to be speaking to us about that. And a lot of people will remember him for being the former CEO at Mxit and iBurst and Cellfine and all of those tech companies. And he's here to tell us about what he's doing now and just a little bit about what's going on in his life. Thank you so much for joining us, Alan.
Thank you for having me.
Alan, man, I don't even know where to start. There's just so much to talk about. I want to ask you about where you are right now. And I mean, I'm not talking about just being CEO at Project Isizwe, but just where you are in headspace-wise. You were telling me just now that you were kind of in hiding for a while there.
Yeah, well, so I unexpectedly left my last venture in October last year, and I spent a bit of time. I had the good fortune of being able to kind of get in a car and drive through America for 10,000 miles and collect my thoughts, and do a bit of traveling around South Africa and kind of confirm that this is the best place in the world to be living, and it's got the most opportunity, and I want to make a go of it. And for me, at least, you know, the internet and broadband and all that is like, for me, I think it makes a difference in the world. So whilst I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to make money, in the meantime, I've kind of got cracking with something called Project Isizwe, and that idea there is to facilitate the rolling out of free Wi-Fi for low-income communities.
I want to talk about that project. What made you want to do that? And this is on the back of everything. I mean, I've just finished again reading your book again, Mobinomics, and I'm hoping that people that haven't read it yet will get it and read it and get some insight into you and into just what's happening in the tech space. With that as a background, what made you want to do this?
Well, firstly, you know, you can't, in all honesty, look around South Africa and actually Africa and say to yourself, well, the future's guaranteed to be better than the present. So, you know, you can either sit on the sidelines and say to yourself, oh, somebody else will take care of it, or somehow get off the sidelines. For me, information makes the world a better place. So the more people have access to information, all the information, both from one another and from the World Wide Web, the better the decisions will be, the better our politics will be, the better everything will be. People can educate themselves, people can start their business online. And that combined with having children and wanting them to live here for the next 50, 100 years, so I'm thinking a bit more long term than I used to, and combined with the realization that Wi-Fi is going to be the technology for most people in the world to get on the internet, you know, led me to starting a non-profit, which I thought to myself I wouldn't do. But here I am starting a non-profit to just make it really easy for local governments to roll out free Wi-Fi. And for me, at least, makes me feel less guilty about potentially saying to my kids one day I wasn't sitting doing nothing when I could do something.
And what has the response been so far from people that you tell about, these people that are in positions of power and influence that can actually make this happen?
Brilliant, excellent. I haven't actually met anyone who doesn't want free Wi-Fi. I don't know if you know anyone who doesn't want free Wi-Fi. It's like gold, you know, everybody wants gold as well. And I've been very surprised, especially by the support I've been getting from local government officials. Truth is, you know, the guys that probably impact people's lives the most in the public sector are municipalities. And I've been talking to one or two mayors, and they've kind of expressed a lot of interest. The city of Tshwane, of all cities, the political and scientific capital of the continent, I think, they are the first ones to bite at this. So the mayor the other day made an announcement saying we're going to do a 3-phase rollout. And with the idea by 2016, we'll have covered every single educational public space in the whole of Tshwane, which is pretty epic, right? And it's very doable as well. It's not rocket science.
But now I'm thinking about the companies that do make money right now from not having free Wi-Fi for everybody. I mean, wouldn't they be kind of thinking this is not such a fantastic idea when it comes to their bottom line?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, you know, we're not exactly targeting the people paying the bills for the big telcos as it is. This is for people who just can't afford to get on the grid. And it's probably not a great analogy, but it's like drugs, right? And free Wi-Fi is the marijuana. for the heroin and the rest of it, which is 3G, ADSL, etc. So that, the guys up the value stream are going to make a lot more money when more people are getting hooked on the internet, just to start with, using a basic kind of service. And this is not unlimited. This is kind of 250 megs a day, 7.5 gigs a month. That's a cap. If people want to go through that cap, they have to go buy it somewhere else. So the for-profit guys definitely don't lose. And actually, in many ways, it helps them a bit because, as you know, it's kind of difficult carrying a solid 3G connection nowadays. So if you've got a bit of load balancing with alternative networks, I think everybody wins.
Alan, are people still asking you about Mxit? It's been almost a year now.
Well, most people don't have the courage, but every now and again a question slips in.
And when you say most people don't have the courage, what do you think they're worried about asking you?
Well, I don't know. I'm not actually sure, but they don't seem to be able to pluck up the guts just to ask me.
What is it that you would like for people to know? Because like I was saying to you early on, I went and read tons of reports before interviewing you, and it seems that the line that was coming from you a lot, and it was that the vision was the same for Mxit, the paths were different, and that you find in just about everywhere where you read about what your response was at the time. So what do you want people to know about what went down?
Well, the one thing I know is you should always tell the truth, right? The more I tell the truth, the less I have to remember what I said. And that everything that was said and has been said since then was the truth. So I think at the end of the day, I made some big mistakes, and there weren't mistakes I could recover from. So that kind of led to a loss of confidence from our partners, and you can't be in a marriage if you don't feel each of you got each other's back. And the end of that was not a very happy ending for me, but a good ending for Mxit itself. I think the mission's bigger than any individual. So I took a lot of lessons out of that. Personally, I think probably at a pure business management level, I had a real dose of humility around a few areas which I could improve on next time. And I also underestimated how hard it is to change a culture, to go in and remake a culture. But what is the consequence of all of this? It was a big setback for me. I really rolled the dice, but and with rolling the dice came a lot of upside and a lot of, the very least I learned a lot. But it was a big setback, and then out of the ashes, I'm having to rebuild a bit of a reputation and some money, hopefully. But I'm blessed. I've got a lovely wife, I've got great kids, and I've got a chance to do it again.
I'd interviewed you last year when Mobinomics had come out, and we were talking about the book. I didn't know much about Mxit at the time, but I'd read the book, and I remember asking you about World of Avatar in studio, you tearing up, being very emotional about it, reading the book and understanding how it had been birthed, where it had come from, how you had fought so hard to get Mxit, what you'd done when you got into that company, and then having that taken away from you, or just everything that happened. I can't imagine there not being hurt around all of those events. And I'm talking for you now, so I would imagine, I'd seen an interview where you were talking, somebody had asked you, what was it like, and you gave the analogy of the laxatives. You said it's like, there's a guy and his friend is giving him laxatives, and then his wife will give him Imodium and he feels better, and his friend gives him laxatives again, and you said that's the kind of space you were in. So I don't think I'm in this place when I talk about the hurt. Have you recovered from that on an emotional level? That's something you built and now it's not there anymore.
Well, World of Avatar was, and still is, quite close to my heart. And I think, I tear up whenever I talk about my kids and my wife, so that's, I suspect from that interview, my kids were the inspiration for starting that. And, losing it all wasn't the, I wouldn't say it was taken away. I lost it, And, it wasn't the best experience of my life. But having said that, as that saying, better to have loved than lost and never to have loved at all. I'm very lucky to have kind of gone through a movie like that and learned from it. I'm still alive, still married, still got great kids, not completely bankrupt. And I'm going to try to take the lessons forward. There was when you go through it, I'd highly recommend, if you ever go through a fairly public and humiliating downfall, I recommend you pack your bags and go somewhere far away, like in a different time zone, so that you can't talk to people for a while. Because it helps you get away from the noise and kind of get the big picture again and get perspective. And I think in the beginning, if you don't do that, you'll become severely paranoid. And I was paranoid for a while. Mm-hmm. But every piece of luck and success I've had in my life comes because I trust people. And to kind of, because of a setback, kind of become paranoid or not trust people, that negates all the good things that have happened. So I'm still willing to back myself in terms of, moving forward and trusting myself and the people I work with. And but if there's one lesson I've learned out of that whole thing is we're all responsible for our own destiny. You can't blame anybody else for anything. And whilst at the time I might have been easy to, in my mind, point fingers, in retrospect right now I've got nobody else to blame for any of that than myself.
When you left though, what was the leaving like for you in terms of these are people that you'd been with? And I mean, you talk about, I really want people to read this book, and I keep on saying I want people to read this book because you really get such an insight into, first of all, such an insight into Mxit, and then just such insight into what is happening in South Africa and Africa. And I think that this is what I got the second time reading it. I honestly felt as though the South Africa that you describe in this book, and that you're telling us about in this book, is not something that I even know about. And I almost feel as though if you haven't read this book, you don't really know what South Africa is about, and you don't really know what Africa is about. Having said that, you're leaving these people that you've created this with. At that moment, when you're saying to them, well, I've sold you this dream, and now off I go.
Yeah, no, great. Look, I mean, the step-by-step was packed my boxes on the 19th of October. I went in quite early, so I didn't see anyone. And I left the office before I saw anyone. And then got home, and my wife told me she's pregnant. Well, I was third, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So there was a silver lining to that dark cloud. But it wasn't like a very unpleasant breakup. It was just a breakup. And so it was all very amicable, and I had a farewell party, and my friend Frank, who's the CEO now, he had a very nice speech for me and picked up the cost of the pizzas, which was quite nice. So, in the end, I think at the time, any of these things, all the information is not available. It's very difficult to understand. I'm sure kids get a little bit confused when their parents get divorced, and they might take it personally. But in the end, enough time has passed that we're kind of all fine. We'll bump into each other on the streets of Stellenbosch. But it feels a bit funny because they used to look at me as the boss who signs the paychecks, and now they just look at me as another random person they're bumping into. But it's kind of worked itself out.
I want to read something to you about somebody that worked at Mxit. I don't know if you want to know who they are, but this is what they said about you. They said, I'm sure a lot of people will be doubting whether Knott-Craig really is a visionary based on the events of the last 24 hours. His investors clearly didn't, but let me tell you that the man is damn inspiring. He keeps an incredible cool head under pressure, has a long-term view, and understands that aspiration is an important building block of any brand. The yearly party was something out of a millionaire's dream. It was inspiring stuff. The staff was happy and sold in the dream that Knott-Craig played out in front of them. What was even more inspiring was that Knott-Craig himself looked like he truly believed. During his 12 months at the helm, we all believed that we were part of an inspired mission. And then they let him go. Suddenly, all the magic is stripped away, and all you see is a company spending money it clearly doesn't have. And so it's almost as though when you left, for some people that were working under you and with you, they just felt you went with the magic, And how does that now translate into you moving forward?
Well, I'm flattered by those kind of comments. And there are two types of people in the world. You get the people who are quite conservative, and then you get the dreamers, And dreamers like me, I'm a bit of a dreamer, and I speak their language. Although I'm a chartered accountant, so I also speak the language of the conservatives, So just as much as there might be one or two comments like that, I'm sure there were some, finally the guy is just talking his art, I think there's a balance to be had, and if I made a mistake, I think maybe getting a little bit too visionary, a little bit less I didn't get enough into the detail. Having said that, you have to end everything. I think that's fair.
You have said that one of the things, well, two of the things that you, when it comes to business, that you would like to, and this is a while ago. You had this interview. It was last year in November, I think. You had this interview, and you were talking about processes, and you were talking about salespeople, and how these are two things that when you were going to have another venture, you were going to look at more closely and integrate into what you were going to build. And you're smiling at me. Is that something that you're still thinking of that you need?
I actually think a lot of what I say is a lot of crap. You shouldn't listen to everything I say, and I change my mind all the time. I've got a list of 100 things that I've got to do better next time round. Processes, finances, sales. There are hundreds of things, and maybe I can write a book about that one day. The thing is, for me, the important thing is about people at the moment. Trying to understand who's my tribe and who's not my tribe. It's not fair to get into bed with people who are not your tribe, on either party. You're just setting yourself up for failure. And that's I think that's like some big lessons for anybody. Sometimes you get lucky when you marry a partner in life, and it turns out you're the right person for each other, and sometimes you don't. But I do think in the tech community of Africa and South Africa, there is a very kind of casual approach to trying to make money. It's more about users, it's more about following Silicon Valley, it's more it's too much hype. If you don't make a profit, you can't pay the bills. South Africa, you can't raise capital to pay your bills. It doesn't work like that. You don't raise capital every 6 months to pay salaries like it happens in America. And you will never succeed here if you don't think about it from day one, how you're going to pay your bills, how you're going to make a profit. And that's something I would encourage everybody to just pay a bit more attention to. Just ignore the Americans, because I actually think it's a lot of crap. And look at what's right in front of you right now. And remember that no one ever got ahead in life without making a profit. And I don't think there's enough money in this virtual world in itself. I think the money there has to be some real world component to your business, and that's why, funny enough, e-commerce seems to be taking off. Of all the tech ventures on the continent, the ones that seem to be making the money the most are the e-commerce ventures, because there's a real world element.
But then, if you look at Mxit and the model that you had, is that a component that was missing for you?
No, our strategy in the beginning, I'm not sure about today, but it was very much melding the real world with this virtual world. You've got a massive audience of people. They're all buying things. They all want things. We have a monopoly on the communication channel, and we're talking to them every day for 4 hours a day, each person. So there were a lot of things we could do if we could just successfully kind of get the real world logistics of selling things integrated with the communication aspect, which we didn't actually get right in my reign, but it was very much there, and I still think that's the future. I actually think that's the future for all social networks. Really, you're a media channel, and you can't rely on advertising per se to pay the bills. You've got to have something else. You've got to have some kind of goods.
There is something though. You talked a bit about purpose, and I don't know if that's something that's changed now, but you talked a bit about purpose when you wrote this book, and you were talking about. I want to read this a little bit. And you say that every organization grapples with cognitive dissonance, the tug of war between simultaneously held, diametrically opposing beliefs and ideals. At Mxit, the example that springs quickest to mind is a pin reset. It's a cumbersome, unfriendly process, and it costs the user R2 via premium-rated SMS. We could probably fix it. We could probably make it friendlier. At the same time, it generates R2 million in revenue for Mxit every year. So it's in our interest to keep the system as it is. But is it in the best interest of our users? We need to think bigger, see further, not just into the stars, but into our own hearts. A business does not make money, it makes product. Money is the result of the product. But no one is in it for product alone. We're in it for the purpose. If we're doing what we're doing just to make money, then we're dead. If we're doing it for ourselves, then we're foolish as well as selfish. So why are we doing it?
Well, I still believe in it. I get it. And I'm good at the why. I also understand the, making money stuff, but I'm good at the why. I feel quite lucky. I've got a vision, I've got a dream, but you can't just completely be on that side. And I'd say that was a failing of mine. I kind of lost a little bit of my course from the early days of business, where I was very conscious of paying the bills, maybe too conscious, not enough purpose, and swung too much on the side of purpose. It's a balance, but the purpose comes first, unless you're a tobacco company or a sin company. Like those things, it's all about money. Some of the best paid techies in South Africa are working for online gambling companies, because you've got to pay them a lot of money to justify why they do what they do. And I think in that example, the pin reset stuff, if you are in this business of just milking your customer base for what they are, then you will always be confronted with that conflict between a profit motive and doing what's right for users, and you'll die. You'll just die. So you have to be in the game of growing. You have to be in the game of growing. And when it comes to the world of online, it's not good. It's no good just having a good why. You have to be excellent, because you're competing with the best in the world. There is no barrier. It's not like you own this little shopping centre and no one else can own that shopping centre, so you've got a monopoly. So you've got to be better than the Americans, you've got to be better than the Chinese, you've got to be better than the Europeans. And I think that comes back to people again, which is you just cannot have a tolerance for people who are not excellent at what they're doing. Which basically comes down to, you've got to find out what people love doing and make sure that their job is what they love doing, and if it's not, you get them out of your company as quickly as possible, because you're not doing them a favour. They don't enjoy life, and you're going to fail because they're not going to do an excellent job. And the magic of this place, which is what a lot of Americans, for argument's sake, don't really get, is that we have the human resources to do world-class things, better than anyone in the world, as far as I'm concerned. We just got to believe it.
I think it almost saddens me. I mean, I've been in the media for a really long time now. I'm not going to say how long, because then you'll know how long. But I've been in the media for a really long time. And so often I hear people saying, we're going to tell the real African story. And you'll get African broadcasters also saying that we're going to tell the real African stories. And then most of the bulk of their content is coming from Reuters and, from organizations that they're just getting stories from there and not even generating their own stories. And this is something that I felt about this even with regard to myself when I read this, about just how excellent the people that you talk about in this book, that you worked with, where these are brilliant minds and they are right here. You're not getting them from overseas to come and do the work. And to be honest, I actually didn't know that this, and I don't know if people that are not in the tech world and actually hands-on in creating these products actually know what amazing minds we have here.
We do. And the Amazon Cloud Services was built in Cape Town by Cape Town engineers. Amazon Cloud Services now hosts over 50% of the world's hosted applications in the world was designed in Cape Town. We've got a world-class engineering talent in South Africa. Do we believe it? No. Whose fault is that? Ours. Why? Because we don't tell anyone. If nobody puts up their hand and says, I can do this, well then how are we all going to figure that out?
Why aren't we telling anybody? That's what I don't understand, is why aren't we telling anybody? Because and this is not about, this interview is not about Mxit. We're talking about you in general, we're talking about the tech space. And for a long time, even when I interviewed you last year, I said to you, and I don't think you remember this because you do so many of these, but I said to you, when our producer came to me and said, we're going to be doing an interview on Mxit, I said, why? Mxit is for like kids. Why would we be having it on a serious business channel? And not actually knowing what goes into this, And so I want to ask you, why is that? Because I've been in the media space for a really long time, in general media, mainstream, unless you're a technical person and reading, technical blogs or technical publications, you don't know just how amazing the talent is in this country and on the continent.
Well, there's a few things. Well, one thing is it's been very difficult without a hell of a lot of capital to be a success in the world of tech. And that's a function of screens and processors and computer languages and cost of hosting and all of these funny things that just up until literally in the last few years, it's been prohibitive. And the games is a great example. Well, the iPhone came out, You needed to be a big game studio. You need to be EA Sports and have $100 million for a budget to roll out a game over 2 years. iPhone comes along, suddenly you can be a one-man show, write a game in 3 months, sit on the App Store, and you can make money. Until that came, you couldn't do that. And it's only now recently that we've got over 1 million or so iTunes South African account holders. And again, without the South African account holders, you can't make money from that because you can't sell to the US audience. So there's some structural changes, industry structural changes that are changing, which is going to make it easier for us to have success stories, rock star success stories. But I also think there's a cultural difference.
What I wanted to ask you was, you were talking about South Africa having first world infrastructure, third world opportunity. And I think it's really difficult when you're not in it and trying to raise that money to know just how hard it is. Is that opening up now?
Capital is a little bit of a problem, but the infrastructure's there. We've got world-class infrastructure, and the market's here. It doesn't matter how smart you are. You can't sit in San Francisco and have a clue what people in Zimbabwe need, or kind of money for that matter. So that's the magic, right? Right there, that's that little intersection. It's just a question of whether we're going to let Americans and Chinese capital kind of take that opportunity, or whether local capital is going to take that opportunity. But I'm pretty sure it's only going to be local skills that exploit the opportunity. But we also have to start believing in ourselves. We have quite a cynical media. I think culturally, South Africans specifically are quite good at being overly modest, and it's better that than the other way around. I can name a few non-South Africans that are on the other side of that kind of spectrum. But the truth is, if a tree falls over in the forest and no one's there to hear it, then it didn't make a sound. It really didn't. And there are hundreds of trees that have fallen over in a place like South Africa before anywhere else in the world, which some guy sitting at home knows happened, but nobody else knows. And for that, South Africans don't believe in their own ability to compete on a global stage.
How do you, though? One of the things I said to you when I asked you to do this interview is that just reading from, even before Mxit, and I think, people remember the iBurst message that you wrote about don't panic, and then writing the book after that. Just having this ability to, okay, well, that's happening. Yes, it's bad. And yes, it's negative, but there are some positives. Let's move on. And that just seems to be kind of like a trend and attitude that you have. Where did that come from, first of all? And I think that if we had more of that, the picture that you just painted for us right now would be very different.
Well, it would be nice to have William Wallace, somewhere. I'd like to follow somebody. I'd like to want to follow somebody. And maybe that's something that South Africa, maybe the world lacks a little bit. But in the absence of that, my own little... The only reason I get any attention is because there's no William Wallaces running around. So I'm just an outlier in some way. There's some guy who's not saying it's all going down the tubes. And that, I've got to say, is my parents. I was just lucky. Born to the right parents. They're wonderful people. They raised me to be optimistic and grateful. And my old man, very scientifically explained why the hole in the ozone wouldn't destroy us all. He said, don't worry, everything works out in the end. That was his answer. And it did. It actually grew back, and it sorted itself out. And I have a love of reading, and that teaches me history. And one thing you can learn from history is that people don't learn from history. So I can tell you now, the world is getting better and better all the time. And it's not a bet. It's not actually risky saying 5 years from now South Africa is going to be a better place than it is today. Because it will. That's the curve. But I think that sometimes in spite of ourselves, because it's quite funny. I listened to Desmond Tutu say a speech yesterday, and he was saying you've got to be careful what you say, because what you say is not just describing reality. Your words become reality. And in South Africa, if that was actually true, she said, well, we would be just dead, right? But there's got to be some invisible hand guiding us, kind of holding us. But when the words we say are a little bit more reflective of reality, on the positive side, not just reality on the negative side, then I really think we can take off. But that's where information kicks in, right? So what changed in my life? Until I was 30, I was just an unconscious kind of, I don't know what I was doing. I don't know really what I was. Then I had a kid. Then that don't panic email went out. Then I was spotted by somebody, and I was privileged enough to kind of go to Harvard and do a course there, and I met other people, and I just started realizing, this world's not such a big place, and you don't have to be special to make a difference. You can just be a normal person, and that gave me confidence in my own abilities. And if the internet can just do that without getting on a plane, you can get online and you can see a story of somebody that you can relate to from your background going on to make a difference, then there'll be more people trying to make a difference.
I want to talk about that making a difference and how you see technology playing a really big part of that. And when I was reading the book, I was saying to my husband this morning that a lot of people say young people don't read, the kids don't read, and then kids were reading on Mxit. They were reading books, not knowing they're reading books, and they were reading books though. And it's just that the medium has changed, and people might not be, or young people might not be wanting to get a copy, might not have access to a hard copy book, but then they're reading it in different ways. And so technology has changed and things have changed. I'm very old school, very conservative. Most people on an iPad. I'm still hang on to my laptop. But just how do you see, even with your project, with Project Isizwe, how that could change the way people live and the way people learn, particularly people on a continent where very, very, very scarce resources when it comes to the things that people need when it comes to education?
Well, education is the first thing. Once people are on the grid, they can get Khan Academy lessons and they can read Wikipedia and they can find out the truth for themselves about anything, whether it's formal curriculum or whether it's just educating yourself about the history of your country. That's kind of, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who would argue anything other than that. Second thing is just stereotypes. Yeah, everybody has a stereotype. There's white Afrikaans stereotypes, there's black female stereotypes, there's Muslim stereotypes, there's lots of stereotypes. And unless you see examples that are not conforming to the stereotype, you will follow the stereotype. That's just the herd mentality. And I sort of mix it as well. The kids that were getting on there and meeting people outside of their suburbs, their religions, their income group, were changing. I'll tell you what, the one thing the internet does, which people don't really talk about, mainly because when we get married, we try to forget that we ever had a life like that, is that people are looking for love, right? And one of the problems when you're looking for love is you don't necessarily want the other guy to know who you are. That's quite an interesting thing, but that's something I saw. So if you're kind of poor, you don't want other people to think you're poor. If you've got pimples, well, you don't, you're shy over pimples. If you're slightly overweight, or you think you're too thin, or you're the wrong color, whatever. So, the internet allows people to adopt an avatar. They can be whatever they want to be. They can be what they want to be. They can escape whatever their kind of form is in the real world. And they can meet other people that are doing the same thing. And they don't get judged by their cover, because everyone knows the cover's not necessarily true. And they get to know each other like deep down, because in the end you can't fake a conversation forever. And then people fall in love and meet in the real world and off you go. And just that, if just people can kind of find better partners in life, probably lead to better parents and better kids. So I don't know. I don't worry too much about benefits down the line. I tell you right now, 20 years from now, people are going to look back and say, how could there ever have been a time where every resident of the country did not have an entitlement to a certain amount of data for free, like electricity and like water?
When you're talking about changing lives, I hadn't finished reading. I woke up at midnight to read this, and this chapter made me cry. Chapter 9 of Mobinomics actually made me cry at midnight. And it was this conversation.
Not with laughter, I think.
No. I was crying tears of sadness.
Oh, no.
But it was this. This is just about how the space can change lives in terms of reaching people that might not have the avenues that they need. And this is one of the chats that happened where this must be a young mom that not phoned in, but clicked in. I don't know what you call it. Texted in. Okay. And so this is the conversation. She writes, I need support. How can I help? I'm using TIC and desperately need help because I have a 9-month-old baby. Well, we're here to help. How long have you been using? 6 years, and I'm only 18 now. Well, are you willing to come and see someone in person? Yes, I am. Where? We're based in Bridgetown, 66 Tarantal Road. You free during the day? Yes. Thanks. I'll come in next week. And that was part of it, but it's just a whole chapter of how we hear about it. And we're sitting here in Joburg, we hear about what's happening in places like the Cape Flats, and you see the headlines, you hear the story every now and then, and we don't even talk about it that much anymore in the media because it's been an ongoing story for so long. And then you see a story like this of a young mom who's 18, and a 9-month-old baby addicted to drugs, and she's reaching out in a way where, like you say, she's not going to be judged. And just all these stories of how lives can change. This is something that you've experienced. What do you see going forward, and what you would envision as part of your work with the project that you're doing now?
So before I took over Mxit, I would have been one of the guys saying that online anonymity is bad. It's a cover for racists and pedophiles and all the people that don't want to put their true identity online and stand behind their words. And then I started seeing what a lot of people in Mxit are using their avatars for. And they're looking for help, they're looking for love. So, most companies in the world that are making money from selling advertising online are very much against anonymity. I won't mention any names, but it's not in their interest that we don't know who you are, because they want to sell your eyeballs. Whereas when I read that, I'm like, if you took anonymity away, 4 or 5 million people in the Cape Flats, suddenly there's one less avenue. You can't ask for help if you've seen a crime. You can't ask for help if you're a teenager and you're pregnant and your parents are going to lose it if they find out. You can't ask for help if you've got a drug problem and people are going to see you walk down the road into the drug clinic. The anonymity by itself has been a massive realization. And the truth is, you can't have the internet sitting in the hands of companies. They can't control it. It's a public good. It's like water and electricity. At some point, there has to be some neutral policeman in the middle in making sure that nobody's kind of messing around with this whole system. So whilst the free web comes with some negatives and some abuses, the positives so far outweigh the negatives. And actually, if it'd be nice if Project Isizwe could be seen as the spark that kind of made local governments, because I think it's a local government thing, around the world realize that it's part of their job to provide their citizens with free internet, right? Controlled by the council, paid for by the council, subsidized by taxpayers effectively, and not monitored, and no eyeballs being sold, and no your information not being pumped into some data center somewhere else where people are doing funny things without your knowledge.
What do you think is going to be the real game changer in this space?
Well, there have already been a couple of game changers. Massive game changer around equipment costs. 7-8 years ago, when I was running Harvest, if we wanted to put up a base station for this type of equipment we're doing on the Wi-Fi stuff, it cost R500,000. Now, it costs 600,000. I mean, that's just, you can't imagine it. Normally everything goes up every year with equipment. It doesn't go down like that. So it's 600,000. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Why did that happen? Mostly because Motorola went bankrupt. The teams of the world leaders in wireless technology left, started their own companies, didn't have the overheads, started moving really quickly, and companies like Ubiquiti make world-class equipment now. Super reliable, super cheap. And that's just crazy. I mean, that's like a paradigm shift. So you can build a network now without spending billions. Second thing is there are enough Wi-Fi enabled devices in the market. So 5 years ago, we rolled out a free Wi-Fi network for low-income communities. No one's going to get on it because nobody has a Wi-Fi device. But now, a lot of second-hand routers, a lot of laptops, and a hell of a lot of semi-smartphones as well as smartphones that are Wi-Fi enabled, so guys can get on the grid. So those are the kind of big shifts. I don't know what the future looks like from this space, but I do know something. It's just getting faster and faster and faster, and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And every time somebody says we're going to run out of spectrum, or we're going to run out of this, we're going to run out of that, some genius somewhere invents something completely new, and they can fit 10 times or 100 times more data through the same pipe. So as far as I'm concerned, this network stuff is becoming a commodity. The real thing is in the end going to sit in your world, which is media. Whoever has the best content will once again have some power.
Reign supreme.
Have some power.
I want to talk about where you see Africa when it comes to the tech space, the future, and where are we going. A lot of us have missed the bus. Many of us have missed the bus. But when you look at it, tech in Africa, where are we going? Where are we at right now? And where are we going?
So Africa has some disadvantages. It's kind of skipped the information revolution. Right? So it started out with the push telegraph, and guys have got the papyrus, and then the printing press, and the telegraph, and the telephone, and ADSL, and mobile phones. We've kind of skipped a lot of that. It's gone straight to mobile. So that's an advantage because we don't have the legacies of first world countries, Western markets where there's billions and billions in the ground already, and they're going to have to sweat that for a long time before they invest in new infrastructure. So we get to invest in the wireless stuff straight away, which is why a place like South Africa was so much better than America for 10 years until Americans finally realized GSM was the way to go. But there are a couple of unique problems. So opportunities always arise where there are problems. And there's some unique problems that Africa faces, and I think Africa will solve. And if it solves them, we'll export them to other countries in the world where most people live that have the same problems. One is there are no credit cards. So you have to figure out another way to get money out of people's wallets. Americans are not trying to think of that because everyone's got a credit card in America. Two is you can't build a business in the world of tech built around advertising as a revenue stream. You just can't do it. Everybody's doing it as failure. We're talking about a tech business. A media business is different, but a tech business, you can't have an Instagram, you can't have a Facebook. It just doesn't work. So forget about it. It can be a secondary or third income stream, but it can't be a major one. And again, makes us think a little bit more kind of old-fashioned in a way. Sell something for more than you paid for it. Make a profit. Do that again. Make another profit. Do that again. And tech that's definitely going against what the Silicon Valley kind of norm is. And then the last one is we don't have an abundance of bandwidth and infrastructure. Now, why we don't have that is not because we're genetically inferior. It's because there was an enormous telecoms bubble in the late 90s in the northern hemisphere, actually. And I think the 1.5 trillion rand was written off in a period of 3 years. Companies had pumped money into fiber and undersea cables, etc., in a big bubble. Everyone was believing their own hula. And the result was bankruptcies. I mean, up until the last financial crisis, I think 8 of the biggest 10 bankruptcies in the history of the world were telcos between 2000 and 2003. And lots of people went to jail. But the outcome was that a lot of people lost a lot of money, but there was a lot of infrastructure in the ground with no debt. So people could kind of just sell it for free. That's when this uncapped free internet, free call stuff started. It was after everybody had taken a massive write-off, and they could move forward with all these assets without having to pay them back. We haven't had that. No. Do people really want that? Do we really want a boom-bust cycle like that? And I don't think we ever will have that. That madness probably won't ever happen again. Definitely won't happen in sub-Saharan Africa, which means we have to make do in a world which is a bit more like the real world 20 years from now, and that's a scarce bandwidth. So whilst technology keeps getting faster and faster, and there will always be a solution to scarcity in that respect, you'll have to pay for your bandwidth. And the guys that are building things in a world of uncapped, unpaid for, unlimited speeds are not actually they're not going to solve any African problems.
When you were one of the things that you said is that it actually, when you wrote this, you were saying that it actually annoys you when people talk about South Africa doing things world class. It's like, why doesn't the world look at the way we're doing some things and learn from us? And when you talk about Africans solving African problems, I know that I experience this a lot, that we kind of look at the US and what they're doing, and because everything is out there, and because they're shouting about all the trees they're cutting down in the forest, that we know about it, and then it's like, oh, well, that's how you do it then, And I remember even with our first interview, asking you about Mxit and comparing it to Facebook, and you being very, saying you're not even going to answer that question. And now going back and reading this book in detail the way that I have, I'm actually embarrassed that I asked you that question, comparing a South African product to what Facebook was doing, and you saying that they're not the same. So when are we going to, or have we started, or are we going to look at South Africa, what we've got here, look at Africa, what we've got here, and then start to come up with things that are not models of what has already been done?
I don't know the answer to that question. I do get sometimes a little bit defensive when people talk about other companies and other countries that could possibly be comparable to the awesomeness of South Africa and South African companies. That's probably just more emotion speaking than logic. Truth is that, especially in America, they really get form right. When they form over substance thing, they get the form thing right. We're really good at substance. We can build things. We can really build impressive things. Can we market them? I'm not so sure about that. Do they look all that awesome? Well, wouldn't argue that Mxit's the best looking app in the world. So if we could just get a little bit better on design and stuff, which actually, funny enough, that problem's taken care of itself. Because anybody can look on their iPhone right now and see what the best apps are and kind of copy it for their own apps. And in a world previously where products sitting in some shop some shelf in Walmart in America, you're never going to see that, so you don't have anything to compare to. We, as a country, obviously were pariahs for a long time, and it created an isolate. We were isolated and protected market in many ways. So guys got used to kind of having a little captive market and you can make money in spite of yourself. It's a global playing field now, and the truth is, the more money you have as a company, as an individual, the more competition you have actually. Funny enough, the further down you are, the less competition there is. But at the top, it's getting much more open. And if you don't kind of get your ass in gear, you're going to die, especially in this tech world. It's just a question of, I don't know, the question is, how do we go about doing that? I don't know. I'll tell you what will happen is, we're either going to do it or we're going to die. It's not, actually, I think that's why we're going to win, because South Africans don't die, Somehow, miraculously, pull the rabbit out of the hat every time. I don't know how, but on paper it's impossible, and we do it. And we're going to do the same thing with this whole thing, somehow. For the most part, the people who say it can't be done, let's just get out of the way.
You were saying that you didn't think that you'd be running a non-profit organization. You are now. Is this where you're going to spend your energies in Isizwe?
Well, the reason is because I did start a non-profit years ago, and I didn't run it, but it was good. But in the end, you can't shut these things down because the whole dependency group around it. So when we had to shut it down, it was painful. But I did it again. This time, learning from those mistakes, hopefully making us not part of the problem. Aid can sometimes be a self-fulfilling prophecy, like HR departments. But so that's the principle, right? This is kind of, there's got to be an end line, and when you say it's finished. You can almost your life. I'm definitely though going to have my side businesses, which I won't be able to spend all my time on, that are very much for profit, because it's difficult to take over the world if you don't have a lot of money. And my dream is actually to take over the world. So, but what they will be, I think the future will tell.
Some of the things that you talk about, it takes courage. I mean, some of the things that you did at Mxit, I went back and I was like, did you really do that? I read it. I was like, did you really do that? And one of the things that you mentioned now is getting rid of an HR department. I went back and I was like, how do you get rid of an entire HR department, and now you don't have an how are you going to? It was to me just really fascinating that you would do something like that. And I would imagine that to be successful in any industry, you have to be willing to do things that probably nobody has done and that seem risky and very, I don't know if you can call it crazy or courageous. Probably a combination of the two.
Or stupid.
Or stupid.
Look, I mean, there's part of business that's not fun. It's like being a doctor. You've got a patient. The patient is going to die unless you amputate the leg. But you're going to have a former patient without a leg. That's not a nice choice to have to make in life. And, people decisions are never nice. And I can't say it's my favorite part of the whole thing. I'm not the kind of guy that actually should be in that type of position where it has to be hard people decisions all the time. But, on the other hand, sometimes you've got to do what you've got to do. And in the beginning, it's easier because you don't have emotional relationships. So with HR, for instance, I remember we kind of, I'm not sure if we fired them all necessarily, but we effectively deleted the HR department and the business intelligence department, which I think business intelligence is an oxymoron. And the reason was I was so sick and tired of all these HR issues, and I was so sick and tired of not being able to get reports. So what happened then is nobody could complain about HR, so suddenly I had no more HR issues. Who they complain to? They complain to me, okay. So I can't help you, I'm not HR. It's kind of sorted itself out in some ways. And I think for a small company you can do that. And business intelligence, where everybody now they wanted a report, they had nobody else to do it for them, they did it for themselves. So in a way, some of those functions in a business can end up disempowering people in the company. On the bigger stuff, the bigger risk stuff, it's very useful once you've kind of realized that it doesn't matter what people think.
I went to your site, Project Isizwe site, and you've got a whole team of people that you've, rallied together to do this with you. What kind of people were you looking for when you started this project to work with you?
Desperate people. Along the way I've met people. and some of them you reconnect with accidentally, and some of them you realize there's a role for them. But I don't have any money this time around, in the big scheme of things compared to the last time around, and so I can't just throw money around and make offers that people can't refuse. People have to come in on huge financial risk. People only do that when they believe. People will say they believe, but until they have to come in without taking a salary for a while, you don't know. And that's the beauty of what this little rocket ship that I'm getting onto right now. So I just know that none of these guys came on to get rich or to pay the bills. They came on because they really believed in the story and they kind of hope, they think it's doable. It's definitely not guaranteed, it's doable.
But you're echoing what this former Mxit employee said about you, about being able to sell that story, selling the dream, creating something in people where they want to aspire to that, what you sell them, what you tell them, And so I wouldn't imagine you were talking about being a dreamer, and that's somehow you get along with people that dream that big. But when it comes to this, because even with this project that you're doing, it is going to be that business element and having to do things in the way that you have run your businesses. For you, what is the balance going to be?
The most important thing is getting the family right. That's like the most important. And I got that right with Mxit and Avatar. I'm proud of that. There's a great story. There's a story where this guy's walking along. He sees a sign outside a farm saying help wanted. So he goes and knocks on the farmer's door, and the farmer says, hello. He says, hi. I'd like to apply for the job. He says, well, have you got a letter of reference? So he gives him a letter. He says, yes, sir, John sleeps during storms. And that's it. So the farmer's like, dude, this is the weirdest reference I've ever seen. But look, I'm desperate, so I can hire you. A couple of weeks later, a crazy storm comes through on the weekend. And the farmer wakes up in the middle of the night, goes and tries to wake up John. John won't wake, sleeping. Runs to the barn to go and save the animals, finds them all tethered, everything's safe. Runs to the field to go save the crops, finds everything's been harvested and waterproofed, everything's safe. And that's why John sleeps in storms, because he's prepared. Now, when I had my mini storm at the end of last year, if I had let my family life become compromised by work, then I wouldn't have been able to sleep in that storm. And the trick, and that is the difference between Ivest and this whole thing, is I never compromise on my family stuff. I've got quite strict rules around what time in the morning I get up. I read graft, at 6 o'clock my phone goes off, and Sundays off with the family and all that. And I never compromise that. So my wife and I are rock solid, lighties, and I feel like we're happy, So that's key. And I actually think that's an important thing to look for in partners, whether they're employees or shareholders, like people that actually buy that dream. They firstly understand why I do it, but I also don't have to worry that when the storm hits them, they're going to be panicking. Because they're rock solid at home. And if you don't have a rock solid home, it's game over. So if there's any one thing I'm looking for, it's kind of that. You just get the fact that it's not about whether you're moving. It's about whether you're on the right path. And sometimes you're so busy working, showing that you're at the office, last one out the office every night, that you're going down the wrong path, man. In the end, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what I think, it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. In the end, you have to kind of look yourself in the mirror and be happy. And I don't want to be 60 years old and alone, and my kids say to me they didn't know me when I was growing up. I'd rather be poor than that and have my kids dig me and have a happy, healthy relationship.
There was this, I want to read this. This is the last thing I want to read from your book. I know I've read quite a bit, but this book just talks to what you're talking about now. You say that, so the only thing I really have to fear is that in the midst of it all, I might forget my family. If I ever reach an inflection point where I must choose, I will have failed. I can't allow that to happen. And so that again, I mean, when you start the book, when you're talking about, you talk about the relationship with your wife and how important that was, and that there was a time where your wife was feeling, where things were not rock solid, like the way you're talking about it now. What do you, just from that, about what success means, how do you measure your own success?
Well, firstly, I just listen to you read that. I'm like, geez, I can't believe I wrote that. That is so cheesy. I mean, the kind of school I went to, you get beaten up for that kind of thing. It just shows I've overcome my fear of what other people think.
I think it's brilliant because it says exactly what you said now about your family being so
It's
core.
the truth. But I tell you, not many people tell the truth. So anyway, that's in print, so I guess that's what it is. I don't know what's happening. Me personally, I can't be happy unless I feel like I'm doing something, moving. Just want to be making some kind of impact, something. And I'm kind of lazy person, so I don't want to feel like I'm on a treadmill that if I get off it, everything stops. I've got to be like knowing that whatever gets going has its own momentum and runs. So free Wi-Fi is like it's a network that runs. You don't have to go and sell hours every day like I used to as an auditor. So that's my purpose. And I think if I can say 40 years from now I've made a bit of a difference in the information revolution, sign me up. That's a success. And then a happy wife and happy kids. But I've also realized that stuff comes from me being happy in what I do with my life. So, look after yourself first and the rest takes care of itself. But it helps having a good partner.
Mm-hmm. Are you happy now?
Never been happier.
Yeah. And what is making you that happy?
I feel like I'm my own man. Yeah? I don't talk to people I don't want to talk to. I look myself in the mirror every day. I like what I see. I don't like what I see on my bank account, but I like what I see in the mirror.
And sometimes, don't you? I know when I put everything on hold last year, my job, my business, and I was saying this to you before the interview, and it's madness to people, and they ask me, why are you going to do that? And I didn't have a really good reason other than, I just wanted to find myself in my space. And for you, I mean, that wasn't the reason that you left everything and started on the new path. But do you sometimes think that, you'd said at some point in the interview that what was happening at Mxit, at some point, you weren't going to be there anymore, maybe. There was going to come a time when the dream was going to come to an end. So, having said that, do you think that perhaps what happened last year, you wouldn't be here feeling the way you feel and being as rock solid as you are?
I would feel as happy as I was happy then. And I wasn't making compromises in some areas of my life. But I learned some lessons that I'm fortunate to have learned. And that makes me a stronger person. And that's the key. In the end, I was learning stuff whilst I was there anyway, right? But leaving also taught me a lot of things. And I feel like I've learned a lot of things. So provided they haven't damaged me for good, I'm pretty confident that whatever I've taken out of that I can apply going forward.
What are some of the biggest things when you look back that you did learn?
If you're aiming for a mountain and you've got a bus and you've got to get everybody on the bus, it's very important that the right people on the bus. It actually doesn't matter. You don't have to steer the bus. If you've got the right people on the bus, they'll get you to the mountain. But you've got to get the wrong people off that bus bloody quickly. You've got to get the right people on that bus bloody quickly. And that's very important. And that comes down to the culture of the bus, right? Because culture expels people and attracts people. So it's an ethereal thing to talk about. Culture is very important. And I'm more conscious of that now. And I'm much more conscious of the need to cut off legs that are going to kill the body, and just have one leg rather than go through. The other thing I'm very, very conscious of is just because people look like you and sound like you and laugh at the same jokes you do, it doesn't mean they're part of your tribe. And you've got to find people that are part of your tribe, otherwise you're not going to be happy and they're not going to be happy. And somehow there's got to be some other layer that you can find other than colour of skin. But one big thing is public failure is not as bad as it looks from the outside. And even whilst you're in it, it's quite bad in retrospect.
I would imagine that made it worse. It's not only, I would imagine that made it worse.
It was pretty embarrassing, I must say. I couldn't walk around for a while. I'd kind of walk around and think people were looking at me. I feel a bit awkward. You kind of want to hide away. It was quite embarrassing. I don't know, maybe at school it's like that if you get dumped by a girl or something. But people who matter don't care. The people who care don't matter.
How do you feel now, though? Because I've been wanting to speak to you since you were at Mxit. After we had our conversation CNBC, and I think a lot of people feel that about you, that, you know, the rock star entrepreneur that they saw running Ibers, that they saw at Mxit, that hasn't changed and that hasn't dimmed. Do you sometimes now, do you feel that you're in a space, like you were talking about being your own man, do you feel that you're in a space where Mxit is now really the past, and now you've got a future and you've got a present that really is not tied to Mxit anymore?
Yes. That's all behind me now. And there was a roller coaster, up, and down, smash and ashes and everything, and get back on the horse. And in between, there's a loss of confidence. You kind of start doubting yourself. You start thinking, oh, what if I never find another goal, you know? And maybe I should go work for somebody, you know, you kind of, all of those things that it's so easy to, when the times are good, to advise people to take a risk and all that stuff. And then when you personally go through a crisis, it's harder to kind of stick to those words. But through it all, you push through, provided you've got loved ones who do dig you. And I've come out the other side okay. I'm still alive. And I think I'm over it, you know. I still think of it. I definitely still think of it, and I still believe in it. And I still believe that Mxit's the only chance Africa's got of a really world-dominating consumer application in social media. It really is. The game's finished. Anybody who's not in it yet is not going to win it. And, you know, there's a part of me that would really like to be part of that ride. But they're good guys. My partners over there treated me honourably. Everyone's got the best intent in the world. And they're good people working in that company. So, just to put I'm not on it, but I don't lose sleep over it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Alan, is there anything you want to share with us before we go?
I've been lucky enough to travel quite a lot. I've been quite a few countries. And the countries I've been to have been poor countries and rich countries. Yeah? And I continue, man. We're living in the best country in the world. And the more people just realise that, I think the more we'd be committed to kind of making the most of what we've got. And holding hands rather than worrying what's going on behind the other person's eyes. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Alan, thank you so much. We got you a gift to thank you. But I thought this is for your new project, and so that there's nobody at Project Isizwe ever standing in the queue waiting for coffee. You can rip it open.
No reason to sleep. It's a nice big present. A little bit unnecessary. Oh, well, that's great. Not often the media give me a gift. No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was reading this and I'm thinking, I don't think I know anybody that loves coffees. I don't think you realize how much you wrote about coffee in this book.
Did I?
Yes.
No, well, coffee is important. It's one of those few things in life you can't compromise.
Yeah. So we didn't want any compromise at Project Isizwe. So
thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us, Alan.